and it's also being live streamed on SDPI's social media channels. We have participants joining us through Zoom, LinkedIn, X, as well as YouTube. The recording would be available online, and it will also be forwarded to all of you. You may revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it within your networks. We will request the speakers to turn on the cameras if their network allows them to do so without any disruption, especially while they're speaking. So for participants who joined us online, there are dedicated Q&A.
I think you might be on mute.
Obesa, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So sorry. Yeah, actually the internet was acting a little bit. So I was just taking into the agenda. We'll start with the scene setting presentation from SDPI's end, and that would be followed by two roundtable discussions. The first one would be strengthening the policy credibility to enhance the mobilization of finance for a country platform, where we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Crispian Allwood. He's a senior advisor at Country Platforms Hub. We're also very pleased to have with us Mr. Thomas. He's the Director of Policy and Strategy at JETP at the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFRANS. We also have Mr. Akshi. He's a Senior Research Officer, Climate and Sustainability at ODI Global. We have will shortly be joined by Ms. Hadika Jamshed. She's the Country Engagement Advisor at NDC Partnership. And we also have a lot of these other experts, especially Mr. Hamad Bashir Saab is also here from the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. And the second roundtable will be on building the justice and equity principles into Pakistan's energy transition finance framework, where we have Mr. Hussain Jawar. He's the CEO of Indus Consortium. Ms. Afia Salam, she's an environmental communications consultant. We also have Ms. Saida Kishmala. She's an advocate at Islamabad, but also one of the very recently known expert who talks a lot about the communities. We also have Ms. Isha. She's from Alternate Law Collectives, and Ms. Amna and Haris from Policy Research Institute for Equitable Development. So first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Now, again, very briefly, before I come to the presentation and topic at hand. Let me just very quickly set a context that actually look at the climate action journey of Pakistan. There has been a very good progress on multiple fronts. But if you look at it from the lens of the climate finance, the climate action has actually been constrained by the inability to effectively attract the international finance, and despite already having a very limited fiscal space. I think despite that, yet vulnerability is increasing day by day, and that kind of underscores a very urgent need to mobilize significantly the high levels of international climate finance by using different innovative financial mechanisms that can kind of also not just reduce investment risk, but that can also strengthen the investor confidence and maximize the use of public, private, and philanthropic resources rather than increasing the debt liabilities for the country. And within this process, the fundamental challenge for Pakistan that remains is again kind of a lack of a defined or a well-discussed institutional architecture that exists for the climate finance. This is what brings us today to the discussion that is around the country platforms that have actually emerged as a very promising mechanism for coordinating climate and development finance by aligning the national priorities with development partners, multilateral institutions, private investors, and even the domestic stakeholders under a very centralized government-led framework. So yeah, recognizing this, the concept of country platforms has actually gained very significance even within Pakistan's, both within the Ministry of Finance as well as the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination as a very potential implementation mechanism for countries. Recently launched Climate Prosperity Plan that was led by CVF and has been recently approved by the Ministry of Finance. However, even beyond that, several foundational challenges still persist that must be addressed before such a platform can actually become operational. Such as the fragmented policy, institutional frameworks, a very weak alignment between climate commitments and sectoral and fiscal policies. Also, some of the limitations in developing investment pipeline. But I think we'll go into a lot of these details as we go along with the discussion. So I'll perhaps stop here and move directly to the formal scene setting presentation, for which let me invite Ms. Nisma Rizwan. Nisma is currently working as a research associate in SDPI, and Nisma will do this presentation. So if I can also, in the meanwhile, request her MIS team to please allow Nisma to share her slides as well. So yes, Nisma, with this, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for permission to share the slides. Okay. All good?
Should we just widen the screen or put it to slideshow?
Well, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess good morning for some as well. I'm Nisma. I work as a research associate at SDPI's Energy Unit, and I mostly look around our climate finance portfolios here. So just sort of building on the context where that's already set quite in detail. And also because we have a diverse sort of audience with us today, so who might not be as familiar with the concept of country platforms or what is happening with them. It's just I'm gonna take just a little bit of time to just go through basically setting a background and setting the stage for the discussions that will follow. So just let's say, well, let's starting from the very basics. So whenever we look towards climate finance from a development from a developing country's perspective, there's always like a recurring theme for any country. The biggest issue is that the climate finance gap is widening, and just to give an example, if we want to achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius target set by the Paris Agreement, we need at least $6.5 trillion by 2030, increasing to about $8 trillion by 2035, which is again a lot of money, which I believe no developing country can actually mobilize domestically. So we often look towards international resources, but again, when we look at the international or like the global climate finance architecture, I won't go into details of what like a detailed analysis of it, but let's just say there is a lot of room for improvement in it. Particularly when we look towards increasing the effectiveness of how the finance is mobilized and how it actually results in the results that are expected of it. Here, just in terms of improving the effectiveness, there is like a widespread recognition among different actors, financiers, or recipients both, that we now need to move away from like an individual project-based framework towards a more programmatic or multi-project portfolio-like approach. just to make sure that every investment that is made is more holistic. And then at the same time, in order to ensure that it is, sorry, it actually brings the benefits that it was supposed to. It is also encouraged now that any framework or any arrangement that is decided should be nationally owned rather than being donor driven, because in that sense, it is easier to align it with a country's national priorities or priority sectors as well. So the targets that it has set, based on its own particular needs. So a country platform is something that does exactly that. It's a kind of so it basically brings all relevant stakeholders onto a single platform, allowing them to, and sort of coordinates the, let's say, the financial arrangement between them through a well-structured, already designed, bankable project pipeline, which is, again, already aligned with national priorities and global commitments that has been set by that country itself. So again, just to clarify that these like country platforms are not really a new concept. They have been around for quite a few years now. It is something that has only let's say gained traction right now, like more recently, because of all like an interest in the aspects I discussed just 2 seconds ago. So just let's in a more to put it in a more formal evolution or trend, the first more recent common understanding of a country platform was developed with the G20 reference framework in 2020, I believe. It sort of put out a definition for what it was and what it should include, what elements are crucial to its success, etc. And based on that, there were some early adopters that were being supported by different entities, such as the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. I think a key example, or the most common one here, would be the Just Energy Transition partnerships that have been developed and are being implemented by countries like South Africa and Indonesia. They've already mobilized a large amount of money for particular sectors within their energy transitions for this. Then I think a more recent development, like looking at how they were successful in mobilizing finance at a greater scale, there has been more interest, and at the same time, so at that point, I think back in 2024, different multinational development banks issued a joint statement, sort of saying that they would be encouraging the process of country platforms for the mobilization of finance through them, and at the same time, the new collective quantified goal was being finalized at COP29, 20, yeah. So these country platforms were also being seen as a key mechanism for for planning towards that goal. So once this was out in the open, a lot of different, let's just say, interest grew even more, and a lot of different programs have been initiated. I think the most I would say the biggest one at the moment would be by GCF. So GCF kind of expanded the scope of its already existing readiness program to include country platforms as well, through which it is providing support in, like, let's say, designing and developing the platform, in building capacity for it, and other aspects that are important here. So following this, around 14 new country or regional level platforms were announced at COP30 in November last year, and there are at least 23 more in the pipeline. So a lot of countries are looking towards this now, and since a lot of different organizations are working on this particular aspect, they kind of came together to launch the Climate Platforms Hub at COP30 as well, which with like the basic goal of strengthening financial and institutional architecture and accelerating the flows of finance, just sort of making sure that they were aligned with national priorities. I think we have representatives from the CP Hub and other entities that are part of it here today. So they'd be able to add more to this. But again, looking at this momentum, Pakistan also sort of jumped onto the wagon here with its climate prosperity plan, which was launched just a few months ago in April of this year. So the climate prosperity plan is looking to mobilize large-scale finance for 8 different sectors that are critical to Pakistan's climate journey or to achieving climate prosperity in Pakistan. But the important aspect here is that it has laid down a country platform as the main implementation vehicle for it. And within this, so I think a lot of this is not exactly as in-depth right now because the plan just came out, but the basic idea is that it will be led by a coalition of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Planning, and Ministry of Climate Change. So the idea would be that at the national level, they would, the platform would be managed at a national level, but the project pipeline would be, let's say, developed at a provincial level with like projects coming in from the provinces and funding coming in from a diverse set of sources. Just before finishing, this country platform came around a few months ago, but SDPI on its own has been sort of exploring the topic of country platforms for almost a year now. So we looked into it from different aspects, like the different types of platforms that exist, how they can be applied to Pakistan, etc. And we kind of came to a conclusion that like based on consultative discussions and other, lessons from other already implemented frameworks, that it would be better to move, take a more, let's just say to start small and to start with one given sector, which in our case was the energy transition, because it is a key sector of Pakistan's climate action objectives. And then to sort of use that to develop the whole infrastructure for country platforms within the country, and then move towards expanding it to to other sectors as well. And then we also looked into the different, let's say, the elements that are important to the success of such a platform, and also the challenges that would exist in going towards it. So I think we were able to identify 3 core challenges, which the first one was obviously like lack of an investment-ready project pipeline. So in Pakistan, we usually have an idea of what kind of action we require, and we also kind of have an idea of the projects that should be used here, but we often lack the capacity to make them bankable, to make them let's say to make them appear attractive to investors. So that was an area that we'd have to work on strongly. And then just because country platforms require strong coordination between different units, between different sectors, and between different policies, we saw that Pakistan has a history of weak alignment between them anyways, which could weaken the structure itself. So before we work towards developing or operationalizing a platform, we need to work on this to make sure that it doesn't fail eventually. And then I think climate finance was, in essence, is there as a form of climate justice. But when we're looking towards mobilization of finance or even climate action, we often sort of leave the communities themselves behind. We think about them last, which is also why a lot of different frameworks tend to fail, and as has already been seen in different country platform examples as well. So let's say a challenge that we thought would be important to address beforehand is that all the any financing framework or governance framework going forward should have some form of equity or justice embedded in it. So for the discussion today, we've decided to focus on the second and the third aspect, and we'll go into more detail then. I'll hand it back to Ubaid now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Nisma, for again setting the scene and also defining where we are and what exactly are the challenges. And let me just, before starting the panel, let me just mention that we've now been joined by Ms. Hadika Jamshi. She is the Country Engagement Advisor at NDC Partnership. But I think beyond that, Ms. Hadika has been, again, one of the very leading individuals around the climate action of Pakistan. So now, I mean, taking lead from what Nisma has already mentioned, she's already mentioned that, I mean, it's been almost like 3 months when CVF with the Ministry of Finance led the process behind Pakistan's the Climate Prosperity Plan, and the Finance Division, Ministry of Finance launched it. So it is an ambitious document. It kind of asks for $65 billion a year, roughly 566 billions by 2035 as per the NDCs. And importantly for this section, it states that the implementation will be coordinated through a country platform. And this last sentence is exactly why we're here. So, I mean, yeah, I think Nisma has already mentioned that Pakistan has never been short of these ambitions. We actually had an NDC, we issued a green taxonomy. We also worked around the National Climate Finance Strategy that is in preparation. So what we have not yet demonstrated and what a country platform ultimately stands or falls in is the credibility, the confidence among the investors, development partners, and also our own provinces and the citizens that what is committed on the paper and what is actually going to be delivered in practice and not reversed a few months back. And I think we already had a reminder of that a few months back when there were a lot of discussions around especially since we're talking about the energy sector, there have been a lot of debate when the government of Pakistan changed the net metering regime to net billing regime. And there were real fiscal arguments behind it. But when the rules changed for the people who kind of invested on the strength of the previous ones, the cost that is there is not confined to the market. It is priced into every subsequent conversation that actually happens. And I think we'll also have a discussion, but the JETPs, they kind of also carry the same lessons at scale. I mean, several years on, the binding constraint has not been the investor appetite, but also the absence of an investment-ready line of institutions with real authority and policy stability. So with this, the real question for the panel today is not whether Pakistan should pursue a country platform. The decision appears to be there, but it is what has to be true before the architecture is locked in, and because that window is narrow and it is kind of open now. So with this, we'll be moving towards the speakers, and our apologies for a little delay in the start. So I think we'll initially come to Dr. Crispin. Dr. Crispin, first of all, thank you so much for joining her. I think we also had a discussion with you last time before we did the work around the previous report. So Dr. Crispin, if we have to start from you, I mean, Pakistan has actually articulated some very ambitious climate energy objectives through its NDCs, the CPP, and also some of the sectoral strategies. But from your experience with other similar countries, what elements do you think are really essential to strengthen coherence across different policies so that that together they create a credible investment narrative? And if I may add just one thing at the very outset, is that since the term is being used quite loosely here in Pakistan at the moment, I mean, the term climate country platform, it would also kind of help the discussion if you could just very briefly perhaps say what a country platform in your perspective is and what it is not. But other than that, anything you want to say on the theme and the case that has been initially said by Nisma. So thank you once again, and Dr. Crispin, it's over to you.
Thank you, Ubaid, and thank you to SDPI for the invitation. It's great to engage with you again on this topic, and well done on taking the initiative and leading this discussion. It's very timely. I mean, as both you and Nisma have emphasized, there's the Climate Prosperity Plan on the table. It's quite an ambitious plan. It's got a vision. It's got all these different sectors, including energy, but also agriculture, infrastructure, EVs, natural capital. So, you know, it's quite a wide-ranging, almost whole-of-economy type of plan. And there are these 69 priority projects which are aiming to mobilize some $4.9 billion. So, you know, some big ambitions. As you've noted, it makes a clear recommendation for setting up a platform. So what is a platform? I mean, Nisma gave us a little bit of an overview of how the concept has evolved. And I guess the bottom line for certainly the new generation of platforms is that these are initiatives of government. So they're country-owned and they're country-led. They're not initiatives of the donor community. They're aligned with national priorities, national plans, development plan, NDCs, long-term strategies, national adaptation plans, CPPs. You don't have to have all of them, you know, but it needs to have a clear link to national priorities. And it needs to be programmatic. So that means it has medium to long-term goals. It's aiming to achieve sector transformation. And it's working at a level of scale to bring investment and regulatory reforms together to achieve the transformation objectives that you want in a sector. So, you know, many of these things, you know, you're already doing in Pakistan. It's not like it's a completely new departure, but it's a matter of consolidating and bringing a level of coherence and integration to it. So, I mean, I think the decision is a correct one. And in particular, what a platform can do for Pakistan is provide the political mechanism for making sometimes very difficult choices. So, you know, how do you prioritize and sequence investments? How do you make sure that they're fiscally affordable? What's the geographic distribution of the choices that you're making? Where are the winners and losers? And how are, you know, different categories of the population and workers and low-income communities impacted by these kinds of decisions? So I think a platform can give you a coherent political mechanism for looking at those choices. And linked to that is the ability to link investments with reforms, macroeconomic reforms. So, you know, all of us in the developing world are dealing with, you know, debt sustainability issues, balance of payment issues, very narrow fiscal space. I mean, I know these are very prominent in the discussion on Pakistan, but, you know, let me say all of us across the developing world are grappling with them to one or another extent. And that's why it's fundamentally important to have Treasury at the table. So I was very encouraged to see the CPP give a central place to the National Treasury, because you can't really be designing platforms at the scale that you're talking about without having them integrally involved. You know, my own experience, you know, I worked in South Africa for 5 years running the Presidential Climate Commission, and we were integrally involved in the development of the JETP and doing the stakeholder mobilization around the JETP. And, you know, we were able to mobilize some very significant investment. We got a $8.5 billion concessional finance package. So, you know, quite considerable. We're unlocking some $100 billion of private investment linked to that concessional package. But what's really moved the needle in South Africa, more than the actual investments themselves, has been the regulatory reforms that we've implemented in the energy sector. And that includes unbundling our national utility, setting up an independent grid company, creating an open competitive energy market, lifting the constraints on private investment in renewable energy, incentivizing domestic solar rollout, rooftop solar, which you've done incredibly well on, by the way. And, you know, when we lifted the cap on private sector generation, we were able, in the space of 2 years, to get about 10 gigawatts of power generated by the private sector. And it was an incredibly simple regulatory reform. I mean, we basically lifted the cap on private generation. And I know you're busy debating a whole lot of reform issues. You're grappling with disco reform, which I think is fundamentally important to create credible revenues, etc. Like South Africa, you have transmission constraints. So, you know, there's an active attempt to roll out the transmission network so you can bring all of these. You've got spare generation capacity. We don't in South Africa, but the grid rollout is even more important for you to connect the spare generation capacity that you have. So, you know, those market reforms are fundamentally important, as is the underlying pipeline development function that, you know, coherent platforms bring to the table. And then I know it's the topic of the later panel, but if I could also just talk briefly about integrating social and development concerns into these transitions, because, you know, everyone likes to get obsessed with the investment requirements and how to catalyze and unlock private investment, which is fundamentally important. I mean, that's the machine that's ultimately going to deliver. But for a transition to be politically sustainable, we've also got to be very mindful of the distributional effects of the platform. And, you know, in particular, we've got to look at questions around affordability. You know, is the electricity reform and the investments that we're going to do is it going to bring tangible benefits in terms of affordability, reliability, employment, regional development? So any investment coming through the platform system needs to answer questions around affordability. What's the jobs impact? Where are the jobs going to be gained and lost? What's the geography look like? And, you know, which provinces and communities are going to receive the benefits and bear the cost, and how do you mitigate that? And what level of participation has there been? So, you know, are affected groups able to influence the design of projects and the overall platform before it gets implemented? So, yeah, just to come back and, you know, in closing, answer your question. I think fundamentally, you know, credibility rests on having an inclusive and integrated governance system that isn't just about bringing the national ministries together, but, you know, bringing the provinces and communities and private sector and workers into decision-making structures. It's about having proper macroeconomic conditions for private investment that allows projects to earn predictable revenues, have credit-worthy off-takers, have contracts that are honored, that matches energy sector reform with the investment proposition. I mean, I see it as part and parcel of it, and integrates distributional outcomes into the country platform design. So I will leave it at that, Ubaid.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. No, thank you so much, Dr. Crispin, for sharing the lessons, especially towards the later arguments on the inclusion of the social angle. So with this, let me come to Archie from ODI Global. Once again, Archie, thank you so much for joining it and taking lead from what Dr. Crispin has also highlighted. So beyond some sound policies, I mean, what is your view on what institutional and governance arrangements you think are really vital to ensuring that commitments are also translated into predictable, transparent, and also some accountable implementation that investors and development partners can actually trust? And to make it also a little concrete for us, perhaps, if you have any views on what does a platform secretariat needs in order to hold some real authority rather than a kind of a very convenient mandate, and which should it kind of sit relative to the finance ministry? And I think even beyond that, if you want to respond to any of the other points. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ubaid, and thank you very much for having me at this, as Crispian said, very well-timed webinar. I think, well, just to go straight in, I think the first thing to be clear about is that there isn't one model that sort of the people outside are looking at and saying, oh, we need that, and otherwise we won't trust it. So the first thing is to say that sort of any institutional arrangements and governance arrangements should be built on what exists already in the country, and what can be made to work in the country. I mean, apart from anything else, if you sort of quite often sort of coming in and creating a whole new institutions and new mandates sort of can then step on toes where mandates already exist and cause a lot of political tension, which is the opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve. So in that sort of wider world where there's sort of no one model, just trying to get at some of the things that are really useful. So obviously political alignment, because these are such enormous tasks that the country platform is setting out to achieve, you need pretty major political alignment behind it. I mean, if it's small enough for one ministry to take on by itself, then things are quite simple, and the ministry should probably just carry on. You do a country platform because you're aiming at something a bit more, which requires that cross-governmental alignment. And so an institutional framework that is clearly going to be able to feed in the voices of all the line ministries, of all the sort of the Ministry of Finance, as Crispian said, is vital. Any other key stakeholders, often the head of government's office. I mean, that is one thing where, because you not only want them to talk to each other, but you want to sort of ideally be able to sort of push to work together. And I think that is something that Crispian's talked about in South Africa, in the South African case, is that being set out from the Prime Minister, the President's office, you get this sort of the ability to knock heads together, and to say, like, you know what, this is the national priority right now. This is what we want to get done. So having the sort of the institutional structure, some kind of interministerial committee, some kind of decision-making task force that's going to be able to set the direction that you want the country platform to go in. Relatedly, I mean, on alignment, I mean, this is, you don't necessarily want to build this in terms of the institutional structure, but donor alignment is also vital for the country platform. That doesn't mean, as in the original JETPs, that you want to have a kind of international partners group that is also giving directions to the country platform. That runs into challenges with country ownership, of course. But you do want the country platform, whether it's the secretariat or some institutional arrangement there, to have the job of coordinating between donors and development partners, and being able to say, you know what, this is what we're trying to do, and we would really like you to come in behind this and not go off and do your own thing. Another part of it is the sort of longer term political stability, since this is something that you really that is going to take a few years. It's quite important for this not to be the sort of just the fashion of the day. And this is obviously extremely challenging, and many countries are dealing with this in one way or another, trying to survive, making sure that the country platform things survive political transitions. And without going, I think that could be a whole topic in itself. But one way in which you can help with that is getting to this third thing, which is remembering that a country platform is ultimately about delivery. I think to sort of the question that you asked, Crispian, what it is and what it isn't. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it's called, but country platforms are about delivering those priorities. So the goals, therefore, should be about what you're delivering as well, not about process. You're not sort of measuring the success of a country platform by talking about the teams and the coordination that you've managed to achieve. You're talking about what you've been able to get done on the ground. And that means that there needs to be some kind of governance arrangement to do the delivery. I mean, whether that is actually planting things back into line ministries, or whether it's having a sort of, in South Africa, a kind of a project management unit that does all these things very successfully, depends on the country. Just sort of finally to bring that into the next thing. I mean, the because the other thing about delivery is that, as Crispin said, it's programmatic. It's not about a deal book. You're not. You can go too far into the delivery thing and focus on just getting a set of projects together. What you want to do is demonstrate the ability, learn by doing, what is actually most challenging, because you're sort of starting from the national priorities, the national ambition, and then working backwards. Okay, well, why is money not flowing there already? What are the barriers to that? So when you're working to tackle those barriers, you're then thinking about often very technical problems, but other sort of larger financial problems. These are things that sort of emerge just as you develop the capacity to do it yourself and in those teams. And I think one of the ways, so Egypt provides quite a good example in how that has been a success, and how it's been difficult. So in Egypt, where there's this sort of energy, food, and water nexus, and now transport, Egypt also has a huge debt problem and quite a sort of long historic debt challenge, and they've had sort of numerous debt swaps which haven't really fixed the issue. So the government is very wary of issuing new debt, and that has affected negatively some of the water and food aspects of the platform, I believe. But because of the trigger projects that have sort of demonstrated success in Egypt in the energy sector, where with partners they have been able to say, this is clearly something that will have long-term success in the country and is investable and is just stable, and we know how to do it. They have been able to relax their fiscal guidelines there and permit more debt to be issued around setting up and investing in the energy sector. So I think that sort of narrowing the focus, it doesn't mean you have to have small goals, ambitious goals, but narrow focus to start with, prove the concept, demonstrate that success, and then go from there, I think is.
Thank you so much, Shay, and thankfully on most of, majority of the points I'm fully aligned with you, and this is also what we're experiencing here in Pakistan. So with this, let me turn to Thomas from GFANS. Thomas, again, over to you. I mean, from your perspective of the international financiers and the private investors, what policy signals or enabling conditions do you think are most strongly influence decisions to invest in the emerging economies? And also, what are some of the most critical systemic bottlenecks, if I say, that also needs to be considered and addressed early on? You've already worked on the case of Indonesia, Vietnam. The private capital markets move a lot slowly than the headline pledges. What headline pledges suggest. So, with much more of explanation result resting on the absence of a pipeline, meeting institutions' risk, and also some of the return thresholds. So, also in your perspective, what would have to be true in Pakistan for that not to repeat, particularly on the off-taker creditworthiness and the currency risk, and even beyond that, if you want to mention any of the points related to the debate that is happening. So, yeah, with this, Thomas, over to you.
Thanks so much. Just for those that kind of aren't aware of the background of GFAN, so the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, we were set up during COP26 and work across the private sector to scale capital mobilization, and alongside our sister organization, the Global Capacity Building Coalition, GCPC, which many here may be members of, we are kind of focused on country platforms as part of our wider work on capital mobilization. So GFANS is the private finance partner in 3 country platforms, the Brazil investment platform and the JETPs in Vietnam and Indonesia. For each of the JETPs, GFANS convenes a set of global private FIs, which are committed to supporting each of those JETPs. And in Brazil, we collaborate across a network of 60 FIs to connect them with Brazil investment platform projects. I think we've had a bit of coverage of the specifics of the JETPs so far, but just very briefly, so everyone's aware, these were some of the earlier country platforms which were designed as kind of an agreement between host governments and the International Partners Group, which includes advanced economies and their DFIs plus MDBs. And then for Vietnam and Indonesia, as mentioned, GFANZ convenes the global FIs to support those platforms. We've been working on those platforms essentially since the beginning and have drawn out lots of lessons. In terms of the kind of day-to-day, we provide a lot of support on kind of analyzing project blockers, building enabling environment solutions, supporting some of the cross-ministry engagement, which other speakers have flagged as very important, and I agree. And then also helping to ensure that the capital that's available within these platforms is used as efficiently as possible. Some of these lessons are online. You can find them on the country platform hub's website, and I think it's called the Knowledge Hub, and there's lots of documentation on there for those that are wanting to learn more about country platforms. But just in terms of the kind of main reflections from my side, which might be most relevant to Pakistan and the platform that's being developed here, I guess first, we find that country platforms are far more successful when there's a strong country ownership, empowered lead ministries, and good cross-ministerial coordination. So I think this has been mentioned previously by Archie and Crispian, but I think it's essential to ensure that there's kind of sufficient political buy-in at the very highest levels of government. And I think also what's helpful, especially in kind of supporting platforms to survive any transitions in government, is public awareness of the platform and what it's for, and like how it can kind of help people. And I think that this kind of helps maintain momentum over the years and kind of protects the platform from potential changes in government. And that long-term view is quite important, because for energy transition platforms, for example, they can take years to deliver. So I think that we need to take that kind of long-term view and embed some of the political kind of power behind that. I think it also means it's key to ensure that the lead ministry for the country platform is the one that holds most of the levers. In many cases, this will be the Ministry of Finance, but I think it also does really depend on the specific platform. So for example, for energy transition platforms, the ministry that's responsible for actually deploying energy infrastructure will need to have a very prominent role, I'd imagine. But in all cases, ministries need to work really closely together. And so, as has been mentioned, I think those formalized mechanisms should be put in place to try and support that. And things like very robustly constructed cross-ministerial committees can kind of do wonders for a country platform's ability to have impact. And I saw from the CPP in Pakistan that work has kind of already started on mapping that too. Secondly, I just wanted to mention that I think what's also important is that clear targets are really quickly developed from overall aims. So I think that this means translating the headline goals, either in terms, some country platforms go with like, we want to attract this X US billion for whatever sector, but I think those need to be translated into granular targets and metrics for measuring progress quite quickly. And I think as that's being done, it should be done with the kind of macroeconomic and policy conditions in mind. So there's a bit of an honest assessment of the state of play. And I say this because while scaled finance will be achieved when many of the kind of big reforms are pushed through, and some of them might take quite some time, I think in order to maintain good momentum within the country platform, there also has to be an eye on near-term delivery as well. And so those two things can be done in parallel, but it is very difficult to kind of maintain momentum within a country platform if we're not seeing some of those kind of targets being regularly met. And to do that, you actually have to, I think, articulate them quite early on. and linked to that, I think, projects, especially on energy transition platforms, and it may be different in other cases, but projects are kind of central to that kind of regularly showing progress within the platform. And so I think ideally at some stage, a quite detailed list of projects should be set out. And I can see again that the CPP has started to do that. And then I think it's really an opportunity because platforms have proved quite effective in identifying very specific kind of granular policy barriers affecting project development and bankability. And I guess this links to the core of your question as well around some of the enabling environment conditions and specific problems, but it's things like the design of power purchase agreements, some of the tender processes, maybe local content rules in the energy sector. And I think in the JETPs, addressing some of these things has helped move projects forward to financial close. So I would say that all of those are kind of key. And in addition, it's also just kind of worth flagging that if Pakistan, for example, is aiming to use its platform to attract specifically or more private investment, early structured engagement with private financiers can put the platform in a kind of good position to deliver on that objective. So it's really important to engage those kind of stakeholders at an early stage. I know we're kind of running out of time, so I'll just make a few final points. One is just around the kind of country platforms as an opportunity to do things in a more strategic way in terms of capital allocation. So for the JETPs, there's obviously a private and a public finance kind of element within the political declarations. And so I think it's really important that countries are kind of clear about, whether they're wanting to use their platform to attract private investment and really what that means. And so, overarching private capital mobilization strategies can be underpinned by investment plans, and that's happened in both of the JETPs that GFANZ is involved with, and they're quite specific, and they list projects and they list kind of regulations that the government intends to change in order to attract different types of capital. And ultimately what we've been trying to get to on the JETPs is efficiency in capital mobilization, so that the public money that's available is used kind of as impactfully as possible, and private finance can flow to where the risk profile generally allows it to be deployed at scale. And I just wanted to raise that as another thing to think about as part of the design process. And then very, very finally, I just wanted to mention, I think Archie covered some of this in his remarks, but in our experience, it's really important that any advanced economies or donors that are involved are kind of genuinely led by the host country and its platform objectives. And I think this requires from advanced economies some proactivity to ensure that their TA programming reflects the platform's objectives and the country's asks, and also means advanced economies taking a more active role in kind of aligning technical and financing support provided by public banks that they either own or are shareholders of. And then very finally, just to say that, some of the platforms that we're involved in have had a lot of attention domestically and internationally. And I just wanted to reiterate how important it is to have momentum. And I think a key part of that is making sure that that when successes happen, they are spoken about and communicated publicly and that kind of thing, so that externals can understand what's happening with the country platform, but also it helps kind of build investment confidence and opens up the platform to wider opportunities, I think, if that momentum is regularly demonstrated. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Thomas, for being really specific. And now with this, I'll be turning to move to the case of the pre as well, where we are here with Ms. Fadika Jamshed, Ms. Hadika, thank you for joining us. So, I mean, you're working with the NDC partnerships now. So, I mean, in your perspective, how do you think can international partnerships and financing mechanisms best support countries like Pakistan in strengthening this policy credibility, whereby also providing technical assistance, building institutional capacity, encouraging policy dialogues, or enabling these innovative financing approaches, which were just very recently mentioned? And also if there are any current mechanisms that currently exist. And Ms. Hadika, I would just like to press one thing as well, that Pakistan already has several coordination structures in this space. I mean, you're much more aware on those than any of us. So how does a country platform avoid becoming another layer on top of them rather than the thing that finally integrates them? So yes, with this, Ms. Hadika, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Val, and thank you all the speakers. And it was very good hearing all from everyone from their point of view and from the global example. I will give a brief overview of our project, and then coming back to the question you have asked, Obed, that will also answer when I'm talking about the project as well. So this project is Water Energy Food Nexus country platform for Pakistan. This is funded by NDC Partnership and implemented by Islamic Development Bank with the national partner LUMS Energy Department. So in this project, what we are currently doing is that we are the main idea of the project is to identify projects under Water Energy Food Nexus. And once the projects are identified, we prioritize identifying these projects from the provincial level and the regional level where the implementation happens. So I feel like that the only difference I feel in other initiatives, and this a bit of difference, is that our focus is a lot on the provinces, because after the 18th amendment, the work of the provinces and how they are doing the work is pretty much very independent. So we have to keep in mind, and the from the bottom up approach is much better than going from the top down approach. And also being part of NDC, I've been a principal author of 2021 NDCs. At that point, I realized that there is a disconnect. The ownership is lacking when we go to the provinces, if we make decisions at the federal level. So these projects they are not just projects which are a list of wish list projects. They are also somewhere part of their ADPs, and they are also part of their donor list. And some are new projects which they are really which we didn't go into ADPs, or they are looking forward to have some kind of facilitation in these projects. We almost collected the team working on the ground, collected almost 3,000 projects from all the provinces and the region, did the scrutiny, and now they are finalizing the top 10 to 15 projects from all the provinces and the region. The idea is to make it narrow, not to make a whole list and a big list, but to make it narrow, very specific big projects, not policy recommendation and reforms, specific projects. And once that is identified, then there will be a technology need assessment for those projects and a financial assessment of those projects. Once that package is complete, with the technology need assessment, a financial assessment, and priority identified by the provinces on paper, with the notification, with an official letters. Once that is done, then the whole package will be developed, and there is also a digital platform which will be developed online to represent all these projects with all the information. And all provinces will be part of this digital platform as well. They will have a focus, they will add their projects themselves, they will monitor it themselves, and so on and so forth. When we come to the financial window, one thing I want to clear is that our idea and goal is not just limited to climate finance or NDCs or LT-LEDs or the goals at the federal level. The idea is generally about all the policies and all the priorities of the provinces and the country. NDC will be coming as a very significant part of it, but it's not limited to NDCs or LT-LEDs. So, and the financial windows again will not be limited to it. All projects will be when the matchmaking of the project, financial matchmaking will be happening of the project, then a part of it can go under a TA or a grant fund where the feasibility is required and design is required, and the next stage can go under a PC1 stage, and the extension can go under a PPP, private partnership. It can be a direct private partnership intervention. It can be a blended finance. It can also go under loans. So can be a green bond or sustainable bond. So there are multiple mechanisms which we will be looking for these projects, not limited to GCS or GEF or just climate finance, or even if a project can go under carbon market, that can also be explored, but that's not the core of it. The core is to identify windows, and not just one window for one project, but multiple windows for one project, so that the project implementation can get more realistic as you move forward. So this is the whole idea of our project. The team is working quite well on the ground, and the reason we had a lot of proposals, and there was evaluation process, but we were inclined towards giving it to a MDB, because an MDB is also at a level where they can take the projects forward, right? So we wanted a space which is much larger in terms of so that the project does not finish when with our finances. We are also in connection with GCF. They are also developing a readiness fund, so we want this project to be taken over, or some of it can be integrated into the GCF ready fund, which will go on for the next 3 years. So there is a continuity of it, and this is what the idea behind the WEF country platform for Pakistan. And coming to your question, like how innovation, you asked about innovation on climate resources and coordination, and that's what I was actually doing when I was explaining the project, that we need to really come out of this whole thing of climate finance and focusing a lot on it, because we all know what's the amount is quite less now for all the countries, and to make sure that we are meeting our requirements and keeping it also meeting our climate change commitments, we need to look into a variety of climate finance and project finance available globally. So this project was inspired by JETP of Indonesia, the energy package of South Africa, and also the WEF package of Egypt. So that was also an inspiration when we were discussing this project. But Pakistan gets into a very different domain where the 18 amendments make prevention is very strong. So yeah, so I will not take a lot of your time. I think you're also started late and you're running out of it. So this is the idea of the project, and happy to answer any questions from your side. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Hadika, for highlighting the project. So now, yeah, before just going to the the next session, and before asking if Hamad Saab wants to respond, let me just take another round. And perhaps for that, I'll put a very same question to each one of our distinguished speakers, and request you to be really brief, like in perhaps a couple of minutes. And again, it's a very simple question, that if we assume that the Ministry of Finance, let's say, it kind of stands up, it sets up a country platform secretariat within, let's suppose, the next 6 months. If you could just name perhaps 1 or 2 things that you think should be true by the end of the first year for the platform to be either taken seriously or to be effective. And also, if there's anything that you couldn't kind of perhaps mention previously, would you like to add on? So I think perhaps we'll start with Dr. Crispin, if you want to, go ahead and say any words around this.
Well, I think Thomas sort of nailed it when he spoke earlier about the importance of getting you want to build momentum, as Archie said, and you want to show early results. What you don't want to do is spend 4 to 5 years debating institutional arrangements and working groups and setting up complicated processes. A year or 2 down the line, people are going to start asking very real questions about what's the value add of this thing. So I would not see a platform as a static group of investments. My colleague Steph Raubenheimer often talks about conceiving of platforms as a series of waves of investments. And as you show the first wave and, keep it small, focused, get successes under your belt, you can then build on that and extend the wave and deepen it and be more inclusive. And I know it's difficult to prioritize because, ultimately you have to choose one project over another. You're not going to be able to meet all of the stakeholder requirements. But it's very important at the early stage to focus and prioritize. Focus. My only criticism looking through the climate prosperity plan was there's just too much there. You won't be able to do it all at once. Pick 1 or 2 sectors, It doesn't only have to be energy. I mean, you can maybe bring in some of the more complicated adaptation and nature sectors, but don't try and do everything at once.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Spin. Let me come to Archie. Actually, you already have some very interesting, but if you want to add a point, yeah, please.
Thank you. Well, maybe just two notes on engagement then. I think these are probably less important than the delivery and the political alignment, but since that's been covered quite well, I think, so first of all, with partnering alignment, I think it's really important for development partners to be thinking themselves about how to not try to confuse things by getting very enthusiastic. I mean, this is obviously not a sort of malicious thing that is done often, but by being very enthusiastic about certain initiatives that can bring these initiatives to government and say, oh, we're doing this. And then at the same time, some other organization is doing a very similar and overlapping initiative to a different part of government, and it only contributes to confusion. So a call for sort of partners, obviously, to work together and not do that. And that's one thing that we're trying to do at the hub between our 5 core partners here, which include NDC Partnership, HADICA, and the V20 and UNDP and GCF, but and the Global Capacity Building Coalition assisted to GFANZ. But also to sort of recognize that there's a role ultimately that the country platform, i.e. the government, will have to play in that, in trying to sort of almost discipline partners. And say, look, it's time for you to sort of to adapt to us, as a colleague from the Marshall Islands said recently. One note on engagement, and I think Thomas covered this probably pretty well. But when people, I mean, obviously, a big part of the name of the game here is private sector engagement and mobilizing the private sector. And it's just a sort of a plea to sort of recognize that obviously the private sector is incredibly varied, and engaging the private sector is not one thing, not one track. And there are all sorts of plenty of private sector people aren't going to want to be involved too early. You bring them in too early, and it's like, well, hold on, where's the deal? Why have you bothered me with this right now? There are other parts of the private sector that will be able to contribute good advice at the beginning, and the same sort of domestically and internationally and all that. So yeah, a plea on alignment.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So let me come to Thomas, and I think I'll also kind of request, we also have been joined by Ms. Aishwarya here from the GFANZ. If after Thomas, Aishwarya, if you would also want to add any point, if that is needed. So yeah, but first, Thomas, if you want to go ahead and with any final points from your end.
Thanks so much. No, I mean, I think we're kind of all in agreement. So I guess the answer to your question, within a year, you want to have shown that it's delivered something, and so those early wins are really important, and also just that everybody has a good sense of what will happen next, and broadly when it will happen by, so that there's a kind of forward path as well for the country platform. And again, it's about momentum, but it's also about delivering on those kind of granular KPIs or sub targets or whatever you want to call it, that will help the country platform reach its overall objectives. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Thomas. Yeah, again, if anyone has any points, but again, thank you so much. That was really good discussion. We do have a few minutes. We'll take 6 minutes for the Q&A, and I'll request the participants to turn on their microphone or click on the raised hand tab if they have any particular question. I think we already have a hand raised from Mashood Urfi. Mashood is from Alternate Development Services. If I can request the MIS team, if they can please allow the mic for Mashood to speak. Yes, Mashood, you have the mic, please. If you could just turn it on and say the question.
Yes, thank you, Ben. There was a global example from Egypt for the situation that is aligning with Pakistan, and I would like to say that in practical, Pakistan's situation is structurally much worse and deeply entrenched. And number 2 thing is that under the 18th Amendment, the industrial development and the economic zones, they fall squarely with the provincial jurisdiction. And Hamad Sahib would agree, and there was a speech by Mohammad Yahya from United Nations that when external OD and private capital dictate a centralized country platforms architecture, then the legitimacy crisis would be there, that even if they are a partial stakeholder, that how can a sovereign state execute a just transition when the authority to prioritize national energy security is somewhat outsourced in the partners or the stakeholders. If they are private sector ones, they are external creditors who view climate vulnerability as an asset class. So if international financing models bypass provincial ownership to satisfy centralized risk mitigation frameworks, the platform will fracture along the fault lines of fiscal federalism. So if I just keep my question to the point, then how can Pakistan's CP, country platform, prevent a gridlock between these three things, that federal commitments, investor conditionalities, and provincial autonomy?
Jay, thank you, Mashud. Do you already have a panelist you would like to respond to this question, or is it open for everyone to respond?
It is open for all of us.
Okay, so yeah, I'll request if anyone of our panelists wants to add to this point or respond to this point. Yeah, please go ahead. Sure. Yes, Dr. Crispin, please.
Yeah, I mean, Mashud, I think you're putting your finger on the central tension that a platform has to navigate. And certainly in Pakistan, I think there's a very strong case to be made for a platform with strong subnational architecture. So, you know, many of the projects and programs that you're talking about not just originate in provinces, but are implemented in provinces, and their critical functions of the provinces perform that are ancillary to the process. That doesn't take away from the fact that you need an integrated, I mean, the energy reform process is ultimately a national process. So, you know, you're trying to bring provinces and national energy policy into alignment, which is difficult. As you emphasize, there are different fiscal powers and functions linked with these levels of government, and that very importantly affects the architecture. So, you know, ultimately, you know, sovereign guarantees are wielded at a national level. It's not a provincial function. The tension with, you know, all of us now, you know, the new mantra around development finance is private investment. And what we're deliberately trying to do is push as much of the risk and the financing burden onto private sector actors and allow federal governments to very strategically use the scarce grant and concessional funding that we can access for the things that either cannot be financed by the private sector or where we need to bring the projects over the line in terms of bankability and revenue streams. That, you know, necessarily involves a level of partnership and a level of outsourcing of certain controls. And I guess the central challenge that any central government and provincial government has to face is how do we bend what is ultimately a profit-driven global capital system? How do we bend that to social ends? And how do we protect the poorest of the poor who, you know, are most vulnerable to predation and extractive pricing, etc. So, you know, this is where you need a strong central federal state to navigate that. If the state is weak and unable to strike that bargain, both with the private sector and with the other social partners in the country, the platform will ultimately disintegrate and be dysfunctional. I don't know if that answers the question, Ubaid, but
sure, no, that kind of is it to it. So yeah, I think I'll just take one more, and that question is related to I think they haven't actually mentioned. This is the question we have received on LinkedIn. I'm just picking one of them, which is perhaps if there are any specific, and this is related to the finance side. So perhaps, Thomas, if you'd like to respond to it. And the question is that, are there any specific actions do you recommend that the finance ministry should take to build their capacity for an effective, designing an effective country platform? Are there any already existing initiatives that can actually be capitalized on? So yeah, Thomas, or even Archie, if you would like to respond to this one. Because I already see the GCBC is actually playing a very important role. So perhaps if that can actually be catalyzed to support, in any way to support the Ministry of Finance, perhaps.
Thanks very much. Just, I know we're running out of time. Really quickly, I mean, please do reach out to GCPC. So the way it kind of works is you have a central team, but there are also lots of supporting organizations within. So the central team will be able to direct you to the appropriate kind of capacity building organization, which can support with that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Thomas. Yeah, I think Hamad Saab was here with us from the Ministry of Climate Change, but he has been called by the secretary, so he'll be joining towards the perhaps towards the end or after towards the closing of the second session. So we'll perhaps tell him to share his reflections on this one as well. But taking lead, thank you so much for the first round. I would like to thank all 5 of you for such really specific recommendations and suggestions. And towards the end, we'll also be joined probably by the Dean Saab from the Finance Ministry to and again, we're definitely going to prepare a brief that can actually be discussed bilaterally with them and get back to you as the session goes. But with this, I'll be moving towards the second round table discussion that is on building the justice and equity principles into Pakistan's energy transition frameworks. And that is where we have a lot of, again, subject experts that are working within Pakistan. We're very pleased to, again, I've already introduced them, but we're again very pleased to have with us Mr. Hussain Jawar. He's the CEO of Indus Consortium, and that has actually been working on these initiatives for quite a long. We have also Ms. Afia Salam. She's again one of the very well-known environmental journalists, and she's also currently an environmental communications consultant. We have Ms. Saida Kashmala. And Ms. Saida, again, will request to you to also shed light on what the community initiatives are and how the communities needs to be a part of it, the overall discourse and the climate decisions we have been talking about. We have Ms. Isha from the Alternate Law Collectives, and also Ms. Amna Shahab and Haris from the Policy Research Institute for Equitable Development, Pride. So now, taking lead from what have been discussed, the first session that we actually had was really a lot technical. We were going into the specifics of the country platforms, but when we again coming to more on what the local and the ground context in Pakistan actually is. So when we actually look at the climate action journey of Pakistan, there has been a good progress on multiple fronts. But again, a lot of the things, just like we also kind of mentioned, has been a lot tricky. So, a platform such as the climate platform can be entirely credible to an investor and still fail, because there is a second audience whose confidence it also has to earn. And that audience is the people who will have to live with what it kind of eventually builds. So in this country, we already know what it looks like when the costs and benefits of energy policy fall unevenly. We have seen electricity tariffs have risen by roughly more than almost 150%. Driven substantially by the capacity payments. I think the contracts with the independent power producers, the IPP agreements, that ordinary consumers had no part in negotiating. And eventually, rooftop solar became the middle class hedge against that until the terms of it changed. Even Balochistan still waits on universal electrification while national generation capacity sits idle. And each of the last, again, these climate disasters, the monsoon seasons have taken even the lives and livelihoods overwhelmingly from the households that contributed least to this problem. So when we talk about building justice and equity into financing frameworks, I would ask us to resist treating it as a very ethical supplement to the serious business of the first session that we talked about. It is again not a supplement, a transition that kind of concentrates its benefits and disperses its costs will meet political resistance, and political resistance is precisely what kind of eventually destroys the political stability that a first panel told us the investors required. So yeah, once again, the justice is not in tension with the credibility. So I mean, on any horizon that matters, it is again a very embedded condition of it. And again, just very, I'll come to it very shortly, that even if you look at the NDC 3.0 of Pakistan, a third NDC, it also very explicitly speaks of a just transition and carries a very climate change, gender action plan. The Climate Prosperity Plan, CPP, also commits to expanding access to finance for vulnerable communities. So what we do not have yet is, once again, the architecture that turns those sentences into something that is enforceable. Yeah, that is what we would like this panel to help us with. We have with us people who work at the community level, in the course, in the public interest research, and also in the space between the parliament and the energy policy. So yeah, so let me first begin, and I'll request this to begin from Ms. Madam Afia Salam. Madam Afia, because again, this question is kind of going to set the frame for everything that follows. So as Pakistan seeks to mobilize greater volumes of climate energy finance, in your perspective, what principles do you think should guide the decision making to ensure that the investments contribute to a just and equitable energy transition rather than reinforcing the existing social, regional, or economic disparities that exist? And given how much of your work have been about how these issues are framed publicly, we would be really interested in whether you think the language of justice in our climate discourse is actually doing real work, or has it kind of become a lot more decorative, which we kind of keep on hearing? So yeah, Ms. Madam Afia, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, because you've given me the cue. So first of all, of course, thank you STPI for including me in this very important discussion. And because you've introduced me as such, so I will put on my communications hat here. And the word we have been focusing on, transition, this itself had a journey of about a couple of decades or so. So it started from the realization that the breakneck race towards growth was actually proving to be sort of antithetical to any kind of, conservation or justice, because we were sort of that rapacious use and overuse and misuse and abuse of the natural resources was actually benefiting a few. And so that is why, the word justice, when you insert it into this conversation, so that realization sort of started from when the word sustainable development appeared to be the acceptable middle ground. And middle ground, because in view of the glaring failure of the Millennium Development Goals, which failed, not just because, the checkboxes weren't complete, but it failed to reach the underserved, and it ceded space to the more connected architecture of then, the SDGs. So sustainable development came as a realization, and then, of course, the architecture of SDGs came, hoping that, to sync the development to the goals where everybody would be able to benefit from it. And that's how this, the lexicon also transitioned as we started hearing of organizations and concepts like circularity and fair trade and environmental stewardship. And post-Paris Agreement, as you yourself have mentioned, the NDCs, net zero targets, which went beyond the being just buzzwords. And we saw the convergence of policy actions. Some of them were voluntary, many were regulatory, and which have also led to the tweak, which you mentioned, especially the third iteration of Pakistan's NDCs, because the earlier ones seemed to be, very enthusiastic but overambitious. But the third iteration sort of brought it more into, the realm of realism. And then we have, of course, the green taxonomy by State Bank and the rapid adoption of ESG compliances by the businesses and corporate sector. Now, this is where, the opening of this landscape gives me hope, because while we were sitting in these policy tables, which were more like, these ivory towers where we sit and discuss about them, we should do this for them, we should do it. So though them needed to be inside that room and they needed to be on that same table, and they should be articulating, instead of us telling them, this is what you need, here's what we have for you. Because many times I work in the communities with the various organizations, I volunteer with them. And, it's really sort of humbled me about the way the communities are more in touch with what their actual needs are, instead of what has been offered to them as a perceived need. And I think this is the way to go, because it has to be bottoms up. We have to know what they actually need. And I think it also sort of meets with the one very, very neglected stream that was identified and laid out at the Paris Agreement was NMM, new market mechanisms. And here now we are talking of new terms, like Hadika has also just mentioned, blended finance and multilateral and leveraging the private sector. So leveraging the private sector means that even if they are working within their own geographies, the fruits of those efforts of them being compliant, them being more, cleaning up their processes, are going to help the environment and help the people who live in that environment, who until now, if you even only talk about the energy sector, because generally when people are talking about just transition, they're focusing on energies. I would rather more focus on the word just, because without justice, those things will not deliver. And it also makes the private sector a key player into climate change response. Because it is not viewed, the private sector until now was viewed as the big bad devil, the polluters, and we need to make the polluters pay. But then that payment wasn't, again, helping the environment or the people who were being harmed because of living within the degraded environment, or being at the raw end of the, let's say, the fallout of the benefits that the corporates were making a quick buck from. So I think climate plays a very foundational role in justice, in resource equity. We have to focus on what resource equity is, because unless and until the concentration of resources is spread out, the communities do not benefit. And also the profits that we get from those from the use of those resources, for now I won't focus whether they're extractive resources or byproducts, etc. But the as a climate response, these people, the people who are getting the raw end of the stick, they need some assurance. They need safeguards against the climate shocks, which a country sitting atop the global vulnerability index faces. This is something that we forget, even in conversations. And when, you put the communication hat on me in my introduction, and I asked people that considering that we, the last two indices, we were on the top. I said, if a country is so threatened, do we have that threat perception? Is this the drawing room chatter that you see happening? Is everybody talking about it? Is it happening right at the street level that we are so threatened, so many problems, we are facing so many problems? People do not have a clue, and we are basically preaching to the choir. And I think we need to sort of open that table, give the communities a space. I know I was actually looking forward to listening to Hussain Jawar before me, because they work right down at the community level. And they also listen first. They don't deliver a verdict that this is what you need in our assessment and here you go, here's what the solution is being offered to you, because we've seen that hasn't helped. So I think we need to sort of open that map up, place them on the table, and on that map, see where the gaps are, what our geography demands, and what the people in those geographies demand. You can't possibly have a one-size-fits-all. I'm very happy to see that, the subnational, despite all the challenges, is being addressed, because without that we will not even, I mean, we need to go down right at the granular level, at the UC level, which is something which we have been asking for. And maybe had we reached that level, a lot of our problems could have been taken care of. So I am
Perfect.
really
Thank
happy
you.
to see
No,
this conversation
thank
taking
you.
that
Thank you
route.
so much. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Madam Afia. No, I mean, very well put points, and I think you're most. I mean, you're always very candid and open. I would think you're most candid and fluent when you take that hat of the communication expert. But just like you mentioned, let me come to Hussain Jawar Saab, the CEO of Indus Consortium. Hussain Saab, thank you. You've also with us since the start of the discussion. So, Hussain Saab, coming to you and to what this looks on the ground. So from your experience working with the communities, what do you think are some of the most significant barriers that are preventing the vulnerable or marginalized communities from accessing the benefits of climate change and energy investment and projects? And how do you think can those barriers be addressed through policy and financing reforms? And if you can ground that in specific cases from the communities in this consortium works on, that would be again a lot helpful to the discussion that is that is again happening. So yes, Hussain sir, over to you.
Thank you, Ubesaf. So first of all, I would like to thank you, SDPI, for inviting in this consortium for this panel discussion, Building Justice and Equity Principles into Pakistan's Energy Transition Financing Frameworks. I think this is a very important topic, and I will not repeat what has been already said by other speakers. I will only emphasize on few points from the community perspective. As you mentioned that Indus Consortium is working with grassroots communities in Sindh and Punjab provinces in Pakistan, and especially in the vulnerable districts like Thatta, Sijawal, Badin, and also in the Rajanpur and the southern part of the Punjab province. We have seen a lot of the climate impacts on the local communities, agriculture, and many other sectors. And so I think if any of the country platform which is in a developing process shall take communities at the center of the planning, I think this is one of the barrier and missing factor in entire planning which we have seen in Pakistan. If the communities are in the center of the planning, I think that will be the win-win situation. But without this, we have seen that multiple financing mechanisms were initiated previously in Pakistan, but all those mechanisms by and large failed to achieve the better results because those mechanisms were developed without the consultation of the communities. I can give you few of the examples, like some year back, the Asian Development Bank initiated energy transition mechanism scheme, and that was actually under the just transition mechanism. So during the consultative process, we have seen that local communities were not in the discussion, and they were not invited to be part of those discussions. So there are multiple other things, because we have been engaged with the multilateral development banks. What we have seen that there are many programs in a developing process by them, but those but the local communities, they are not part of these plannings. That's why they are not getting the benefits. As you have already mentioned that there is a solar rush in Pakistan, but you have already mentioned that solar rush has not benefited the 80% of Pakistani population, because the lack of lack of the financing mechanisms which can contribute to the local communities. There were some of the schemes initiated by the State Bank of Pakistan. Those that scheme was benefited to the redeveloper. That's true, and I think we appreciate the initiative. But the access of that financing to the communities was major challenge, because communities were not aware about that financial mechanism. Then access was also a major problem. So I think it is important that any of the project which is installed or constructed within the communities, if it is not including communities into the heart of the project, then it will create a serious environmental, social, and equity related challenges. I cannot name any of the project, but we have several examples where Indus Consortium is working with the affected communities whose voice is not heard into the designing of the project. I think due to that, we have seen that many of the communities has displaced from their homes. They didn't receive the proper land compensation as per the market rates, and in some of the cases local communities they were not able to access the CSR funds as well. So I think these are major issues which communities are facing. So I think if any financing mechanism which can incorporate communities issues and communities priorities into the planning phase, it can create impact within the communities, like if they can train local communities and provide the job opportunities to the local communities, it can create a good impact over there. Then we have seen the health and safety barriers are not fulfilled by most of the companies who are implementing those projects in the community. So I think the compliance of health and safety measure is also important. So we have witnessed another important thing, that women living in those areas, they are actually overlooked in the project planning and the implementation. We have seen some of the superficial initiatives initiated by some of in some of the projects, but definitely if you see that the actual women participation in those projects is missing. So I think if in my opinion, unless planning is inclusive and community participation is meaningful rather than a superficial, any financial mechanism for energy transition will not reduce the disparities, but it will create more problems for the community. So I think it is a good to engage local communities in entire designing process of any of the platform and also the financing mechanism, so communities can get benefit from it. Thank you, Ubaid.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hussain Saab, for highlighting this. And I'll take the lead from the point that you mentioned around Pakistan's solar transition and turn to Ms. Saida Kashmara. Ms. Kashmara, thank you for joining us. So I think that is again an area where also request your intervention. So beyond mobilizing finance, how do you think should Pakistan measure whether its energy transition is truly, Madam Afia also used the word just. So what indicators, safeguards, or accountability mechanisms do you think should be embedded within the future regulatory and the financing frameworks to kind of monitor social and distributional outcomes over time? And again, also from your, again, the vintage point as a practitioner, where do existing safeguards, do you think in a regulatory frameworks feel when someone actually try to enforce them? And I think beyond that, Ms. Kashmala, if you want to bring any other point to the discussion, please feel free to do so.
Thank you so much, Ubaid, and thank you, SDPI, for this opportunity to actually discuss some of these very important parts. And I think Hussain Saab has included the community perspective very well, and I think the point of just is where the community is included. So when we talk about making it a just transition, it's it's the point where you can actually include communities. And even though we have seen this very interesting solar boom in Pakistan, which we really appreciate, and we say that it's bottom up rather than top down, but we still see that a lot of people were left out from it, because of the finances that were attached to it, and they are bearing the cost of fixed electricity now. So I think when we talk about committing to justice in every document, we still have no way of knowing how it's actually happening. And as Hussain Saab also discussed, that you come to a community when you have already decided what you are going to do, right? You are not coming to them when you are designing a plan, and it's basically just documenting them rather than actually having their participation. And we have seen that happening in Pakistan in different projects. I think if I can name two projects, so I think the coal corridor projects were like communities were consulted after the land was already uh, acquired. The wind corridor project, the public hearings were held in Karachi, and not in the affected villages where actually, you know, the community was involved or where the question of community was in there. So we have this big need of assessment plans. We really, like, we always talk about you know, how the social impact assessment is important, how gender sensitive project designs need to be there, but how this is going to happen operationally is what going to be the definition of just transition, which unfortunately, like, I'm sorry to say, is like, it's largely procedural in Pakistan and not really substantive. And like, we have not signed the ILO Convention 169 that actually discusses about having the fair consent mechanism. But now, because of 26th Amendment, we do have Article 9A, which makes climate a fundamental right. So everything associated with that, including communities, is important. And even I think when we talk about the barriers of making this just transition, the legal barriers does come in. And as we discussed, the investment geography comes in. It is about, you know, who bears the cost of it, how the safeguard compliance rates are. So I think it is very important to understand, like, I would always keep few points in mind to get to the actual just transition, is that where is the money actually landing? And does the displacement data and livelihood loss data is disaggregated by gender and geography? And what is the reporting cycle of that? And if we are not measuring those things, then who is at the loss end? And you know, we cannot claim that the transition is just without looking into all of these factors. And I think we also need to see that if for every project, how many of the committed safeguards were actually implemented, because we go to the communities and we talk about these safeguards a lot, but they're never systematically tracked anywhere in Pakistan's energy sector. So if we are talking about CPs, how can we make it a standard metric for the CP projects? So I think all these things are no longer just like a governance tool. I think now with having 9A, and it has a fundamental right, and if we want to track the just transitions, I think it also become evidentiary in the judicial proceedings. And I think governments and officials and financiers both have a very strong interest in making it and getting it right. So I think it also holds the part of accountability very clearly when we talk about just transition, and it also gives the community voice a right space and a direct access.
Thank you, Kashmala. I think we've lost a breath for a second here. But in the interest of time, I'll continue on his behalf. Oh, he's back, so go ahead.
No, please. Yeah, go ahead. So yeah, I just wanted to, take the discussion further to Ms. Isha. Isha, again, you worked a lot. ALC has worked a lot on these financing frameworks, these environmental policies. So, we'll bring you a question that, as per your perspective, how do you think current governance and decision-making processes be updated to ensure a more meaningful participation of the underrepresented groups. Either it's local communities, provincial governments, civil society, and again, a few of the other stakeholders that have been already mentioned for Pakistan's energy transition. And I mean, since you're coming from kind of a background of the environmental law, if you could kind of also reflect a bit on the difference between the consultation as it is usually practiced here and the participation that can actually change, that actually changes a decision.
Thank you, Matt. So I think first I would like to think about how the current convergence is, because there's a very fragmented relationship between the state and the people. Like if we talk about the very well-acclaimed transition that Pakistan has made regarding solar, it didn't happen because we were encouraging more solar uptake. It happened because we were so disappointed by the energy that was being provided to us. And if we think about, like, if we look at the data, Pakistan have some of the highest solar ownership rates in Pakistan, even compared to Punjab and Islamabad. And that's happening because the energy being provided to them is so unreliable that they have gone towards opting for solar. And if we think of, and even if you go to these places and you ask them, okay, would you want to have access to the grid? They are so disappointed by the grid. They're so scared of what the grid represents because of the way their relationship with the state works, that they would prefer that they have a method of self-reliance and a method of relying on the state. And so I think for that, we first need to fix the relationship between the state and the world. State and people, and we need to we also need to go beyond the standard mechanisms of energy provision that we have right now. For example, if we keep forcing them to be on the grid, which is more expensive, which is more which causes more transmission and distribution losses, it's going to be more expensive for both and the people. We need to move towards a method that gives them more power over their decisions. For example, having community-owned solars and microgrids, which allow them to have their own energy. We also need to talk about how the state uses the data it does have and what data it uses as evidence to create a decision like this. For example, we have very limited insight over what the IGSAT has been doing for the past few years. We have very little insight about how the schools are collecting data because they don't release that data. And that limits a lot of how the civil society can engage with the state and how the civil society can decide that their decisions are being made and for whom. There's also, we do need to have participation from the civil society and from the community at a stage where options are still open. We usually have the opportunity to present our comments and our grievances after the IGSAP has been made, after the decisions have been made, and we submit these comments. And sometimes they're just merely acknowledged and there's nothing that can be done about that other comment. And we also need to be able to have a power to say no, or be able to consent that it is at a point where we have the decision to say no, like Kashmala talked about how the land acquisition had happened by the time the people were made aware of, the tribal or, what's happening in Jamshore, what happens in all of these states. And even with, like, regards to solar, there's a lot of controversy going on about creating utility-based solar programs, but the land has been taken illegally from the residents. And so we can't talk about transition. And especially, we can't even call it a transition. It's merely a substitution of resources, and we're recreating the same power dynamics in the same status quo. And it's definitely not a just transition, even if it is, a transition from one source of energy to another. So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Isha. So let me just move this conversation again in a little more deep dive into the regulatory and legislative oversight. So we do have colleagues from the Policy Research Institute for Equitable Development, right? So I think we already have Haris here. So Haris, thank you for joining. I think, any points that you want to bring to this platform, but one thing that would be really interesting is that how would parliamentary oversight, if we talk about the country platforms, or if as Pakistan is developing future financing mechanism, what legislative or institutional safeguards should be established that can actually bring in transparency? And how important do you think the parliamentary oversight would be in enabling this? I mean, given that Pride has, again, played a very instrumental and the leading role in establishing the Parliamentary Forum on Energy and Economy, if you could just kind of tell what parliamentary engagement on energy has, or perhaps has also not been able to achieve so far. And if you may I suggest, if you could also speak a little on the institutional safeguards, and the other takes parliamentary oversight. So yeah, if you want to respond to this, Haris.
Thanks, Abad. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for inviting me, and I think it's a pleasure to be here. I think the webinar is happening at a very apt time because just yesterday, the Disaster Management Authority issued flood alerts for several districts of Pakistan. And it seems like soon enough, we're going to have to deal with floods every year or so. Previously, it was mainly a once-in-a-decade occurrence. But we can see that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world. And we see all around the world that the countries that are suffering the most from climate change are the ones that have contributed the least to causing climate change. So they're the least contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And thus, if I start from first principles, then climate justice is just essentially, it's concerned with why the worst damage of climate change is coming on those countries that have been the least responsible for it. So whenever we send parliamentarians to speak at the COP on Pakistan's behalf, we always talk to them about the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. So, for example, Pakistan is also vulnerable to climate change, but also it has the least capacity to deal with climate change. And this is the same for other developing nations. So we believe that countries that have developed nations that have contributed more to climate change and that have the financial capacity to deal with the climate change need to shoulder a larger proportion of the burden. And this is if we talk about across the globe, across countries, but if we focus within the country, if we look at within Pakistan, the communities that are suffering more are also the ones that are more vulnerable. So for example, the floods of 2022 affected the poor rural communities that live alongside the Indus River Basin, the indigenous peoples, the marginalized communities. Take, for example, the statistics from the disaster needs assessment, that of the 25 poorest districts, 19 were calamity hit. So if we focus too much on the word energy transition and we ignore the word just, then we'll merely be reinforcing these inequalities. So when Pride talks about the retirement of coal power plants, we also talk about the livelihoods of the workers who are associated with that coal power plant. So we talk about income security, we talk about social security, and then eventually we talk about creating decent rights-based jobs for those people. And I think when we talk about energy justice, at Pride, we believe that it is every human being's inalienable right to clean and affordable energy. And consider this as an example for a financing framework. When we're trying to add another power plant to increase the amount of electricity and to assess its affordability, we look at something called the levelized cost of energy, the LCOE. And all that we consider is how much will it cost to run this power plant and how much electricity will it generate. And based on this metric, whenever you evaluate coal power plant, it always wins. Lower operating expenses, we have local coal, you're immune to shocks. But when you add social cost to this formula, so for example, Pride has worked with grassroots communities in Thar, and you realize that the healthcare costs of those communities have actually gone up because coal mining has led to the contamination of their water sources. Or for example, if you look at the communities in Sahiwal, those that were associated with agriculture, coal-fired power generation has caused pollution to the extent that their livestock are actually dying. So when you consider all of these social costs, when you add them to the cost of energy of a coal power plant, then you realize that maybe coal power is not as cheap as you thought. So I think moving forward, whenever we try to evaluate a power plant, whenever we next create a new IGCEP, we must consider the true cost of power plant, which must include its social cost. So I think if our financing framework only identifies the cheapest technology and it does not identify who the plant is benefiting and who is actually bearing the cost, then maybe we can have a green energy transition, but we could never have a just energy transition. And this is what we've been focused on when we work with the Parliamentary Forum. The Parliamentary Forum, for those who don't know, is a bipartisan forum of legislators that we've established in the National Assembly of Pakistan. Hopefully, we'll be establishing these in the provincial assemblies of Pakistan. And I think legislative oversight is the most important thing, because only the legislator from that community, for example, the legislator who is representing the communities of Thar, can actually identify what the problems of those communities are, and only they can tell those people, for example, the finance ministry, about what the actual cost of this power plant is going to be. Thank you, Beth.
No, thank you so much, Haris. I mean, that was really interesting to see. Now, with this, let me come to a very quick the second round, of course, and perhaps just like we did with the first round, I want to put a single question for each of our distinguished experts to respond to. So in the previous session, we asked our speakers on what has to be true within 1 year for a country platform to be taken seriously by the country. Let me try to mirror that question for you. Like if the Ministry of Finance sets up a country platform secretariat in the next 6 months, if you could just name perhaps 1 or 2 safeguards or design features that should be built in from the very start rather than added later, if the transition it finances is to be just. So yeah, and let's perhaps Madam Afe say, Madam Afe, if you would like to respond to it, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think what Hadika had mentioned, the design of her organization and how the provincial dashboard will be there, and you know, all the projects will be coming from, they'll be designed by the provinces and coming to the center, because in view of the 18th Amendment, something similar to how the Ministry of Climate Change has now been framed will have to be done. Because don't forget, the EV policy, I'll just give one example. The EV policy was designed as a response to the Paris Agreement, and we gave our NDCs, and there'll be 60% move towards the clean energy. And they said 60% is going to be hydro, which again, from what this young man from Pride just said, hydro, the cost of energy may be low, but the downstream social environmental damage is huge. So those costs are not calculated. So if this is going to be at a subnational level, that at least all the small provinces will be able to talk. And the addition of the word environmental coordination. So it was MOCC, Ministry of Climate Change, and for quite a few years, that's how it remained. And now it says environmental coordination, because the coordination has to be with other ministries. Now, if the EV policy is supposed to be implemented, it's not the Ministry of Climate Change who can do it. It's the Ministry of Industries and Commerce, the imports, they deal with that. So you're saying the Ministry of Finance. I don't think it's going to be only the Ministry of Finance. You will have to have from the social work department, if we want it really, as I think Hussain also mentioned, and I mentioned it, that you cannot have these decisions as a top-down solution. You find a solution, you find the financer, you take the solution to the communities, but their needs are something else. What they perceive. So perception is reality for them. We may be doing the analysis, very scientific analysis. Okay, they need these here, they need bridges here, they need this here. They may perceive their actual need to be something else. So either we are also investing in some behavior change communication, or rather this two-way communication with the communities. I don't think we'll be able to, we'll be running on parallel tracks. And that is the danger. So a platform, the country platform, needs to have that missing element of the communities, community organizations, whether it's a coalition. I think coalitions work. The platform is also a sort of a coalition of all the stakeholders, and there can be one representation of a coalition of community organization, but we have to have their voices there for it to work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Afia. Let me take the same question to Hussain Jawar Saab. Hussain Saab, yeah, okay.
Yes, I think I have only one point to mention, that if that platform is going to develop any of the financing mechanism for the just energy transition. So I must say that the information disclosure shall be accessible for the communities into the local languages. Our entire work documents, project documents, project feasibilities, EIA reports, environmental social safeguard policies, all are written in the language which our communities, they do not understand it. So I think it is impossible for communities to understand these documents and provide their input. So I think the entire planning process shall be very simple, and it shall be community friendly, so they can provide their input and own the future mechanisms and the projects which will be conceived through this process.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Hossain Saab. That's also again really relevant. Coming to Ms. Kashmala, over to you. Thank you.
I think what Hossain Saab said, I really agree to that. I think it really needs to be in the community's language, in their geography, in their understanding. I also think we need to flip these projects in a way that now if any project seeking CP's registration, it needs to be required, before entering the pipeline, they needs to require that there is no proportion burden falls on the vulnerable communities. So I think the no harm policy should be upfront, not that the community goes and try to prove afterwards that what happened. So I think a simple single inversion like this can change the power dynamic entirely, because it doesn't require condition or language that is like, because otherwise we see that it becomes really like a donor sort of language even in the CPs. So I think we need to flip that system where the communities comes first and everything comes afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kashmala. So we do have one question. Let me first check with Haris. Haris, do you have any final points you want to make?
I think just about the environmental safeguards. I think our approach has got to change. We don't need to just include them because, for example, the Sahiwal coal power plant, the plant is based in an agriculture hub of Pakistan. It's called the breadbasket of Pakistan, but somehow it's got a perfect rating from the Environmental Protection Agency. So I think just a change of attitude from the government, the stakeholders, a better realization about what is happening. And I think this is basically an externality problem that one group of people are benefiting, the powerful ones, the vulnerable ones are suffering. And I think until we can fix this externality problem, we probably won't be able to do anything. Even if the safeguards are there, they'll merely be a tick box exercise. So I just think a more change in attitudes.
Sure. Yeah, that's Thank you so much, Haris, for bringing that up. And once again, thank you so much to all the worthy panelists. We will take perhaps like next 4 to 5 minutes to see if our participants have any questions. I think Mashood already had his hand up, so I'll request Mashood. Mashood, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. First of all, the panelists did a very great job considering the social aspect of the transition, and it made me realize that back in 2025, Angela Wilkinson, who is the CEO of World Energy Council, I was having a conference with her, and she actually initiated the idea of pluralizing the transition as transitions. So it would be just energy transitions or just transitions, where that pluralized S will automatically intrigue the social costs. And from the panel, I would like to ask that do we have, like right at the moment, any ideal or even a semi-ideal example from developed nations or coalitions that are practically active and have the same extent of inclusivity that we are demanding or we are expecting from our stakeholders?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mashood, for bringing this up. Let me check if on priority, if Hossain Saab or Madam Afia wants to respond to this question, please.
I think, thank you. There is several examples globally, especially in the developing world. They engage local communities into the entire planning of the project and the process. We have witnessed in Europe and many in South Asian countries. There are several examples from the Bangladesh and also the Sri Lanka, and even in some cases in Pakistan. We have seen that local communities have engaged with the different multilateral banks to incorporate their recommendations in many of the projects, in the case of the left bank outfall drain. At initial stage, community has submitted their recommendations about the designing of the left bank outfall drain project. But at that stage, the consultants of the World Bank, they did not accepted those recommendations of the communities. Later on, when this project was failed and it created environmental social impacts and community raised the concerns, World Bank has initiated an independent panel, and it reported that the recommendation of communities were very much true, and in the local context that was not incorporated in the design. That's why the LBOD has created environmental and social impact. So this is one of the example from the local communities from Badin, who approached to the World Bank and incorporated their suggestions at the later stage into the report of the World Bank. So I think this is one of the examples. So we can identify many of other examples from Pakistan even, that communities has very much influenced in a decision making at the early stage of the project. So I think we can amplify those voices. We can amplify those voices in entire discussion.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hussain and Mashur. I hope that answers your question. I'm seeing that, we don't have any further questions. So, once again, I think it has been really important discussion, especially, as far as the technical interventions were concerned, we actually had a really good discussion, but this is again equally important, embedding the just element within all of these policy documents. That's again really central to what any firm should look like. So once again, from my end, would really like to thank all the speakers for this session. And as we move towards the final, before going to Dr. Khalid Waleed from STPI for the final conclusion, let me request Ms. Nisma. Nisma, coming back to you, you kind of started the discussion. So since we started, if you have any key takeaways or key interventions you would like to mention before we go to the final concluding. Yes, Madam Afia, please. Yeah, sure, please.
So we need to look at apples to apples examples, and there are plenty. Hussain is absolutely correct. This is the new way of consultations that are being conducted by with the communities. And also there are several examples we can look at from Nepal, from India, from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Philippines, and Korea. So these are just the names of the countries that because we are short of time. Obviously, I can't give you any examples as such, but there are these small communities which are making great impact, and they are making the voices heard. And now the multilateral donors and development partners are listening. So that's a new thing that's starting to happen.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, Ms. Kashmala.
I'll just add one small thing in it, because even when we talk about LBOD project, we see that the community was really misguided, that what was being said was not actually how it was being done even afterwards. And we see that still in Manchar Lake, the catastrophe exists. So I think as Ma'am Afia talked about Philippines, there's this law, that's Philippines Indigenous Peoples' Right Act, which was actually established in 1997. And it's somehow really, I'm not saying that it's without any fault, but it somehow do put up the community voices before the projects. So I think similar things and similar examples do help us see that they are technically also third worlds, but they are making it happen and making it work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Kashmala. So I think, yeah, let me just check. We have one question and yeah, I think that's already been addressed. So yeah, again, Nisma, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I'll just take a minute to summarize everything we've discussed today, just to sort of bring the whole discussion together towards the end. We tried to discuss two main elements, looking at how Pakistan can enhance policy credibility, how important that is, and also into how justice can actually be embedded in any financing framework. So in terms of policy credibility, we specifically for a country platform, we did see that credibility itself lies in an integrated structure or a system that can bring together all relevant stakeholders. And in the case of Pakistan, these stakeholders should not remain limited to the federal itself or communities. The provinces need to be included as well. And then the design itself needs to be supplemented by regulatory and market reforms in order for the whole thing to be successful. And then I think there was an emphasis on so we need interministerial coordination, because a country platform itself it needs to be holistic, and every ministry needs to be involved, and they need to work together. But at the same time, we still need to keep the donor in the loop, because they need to be sort of kept on board with all independent important developments, so we know so everything remains aligned with the actual purpose of it. And then I think the last point would be that for the success of any country platform, it is important to sort of to maintain the momentum. We need to make sure that it sort of outlasts political cycles. It continues even if the people in charge change. And in order to do that, it is important that we keep talking about it. We keep discussing the progress that has been made. We keep sharing success stories, just to sort of help with the investor confidence aspect of it, and also just to make sure that people remember that this exists. Then again, we need a just transition elements to be embedded within the platform. And for that, I think there were just two main points that I would highlight. So it's that communities know their needs the best. So they need to be consulted before any major decision is made. They need to be made part of the design process, the decision-making process, or anything else. They can't simply be handed solutions out. And then we need to include safeguards and just choose, and they should not remain just tick boxing exercises, as Haris said. So that's it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Nisma, for summarizing the key takeaways that we actually have with during the discussion. So yeah, just before bringing Dr. Khalid, let me also perhaps very briefly summarize what we actually had in the agenda. So yeah, we kind of started with after the initial scene setting, we kind of started with a debate around the roundtable on the strengthening the policy credibility to enhance the mobilization of finance, where we actually had Dr. Crispin is still here. Dr. Crispin, thank you so much for being with us today. Along with him, we actually had the representation from the GFANS, ODI Global, and also the NDC partnership. Hamad, Minister of Climate Change was here, but unfortunately, both climate and the finance actually had to leave, unfortunately, towards the end. And then the second roundtable, we actually had, all of the speakers are already here. Thank you so much, everyone, ranging from Madam Afia, Hussain Jawar Saab, Saida Kashmala, Isha, and also Representative Haris and Amna from the Pride. And I think Nisma has already summarized the key takeaways. With this, let me then invite Dr. Khalid Walid. Dr. Khalid is working as a research fellow for his final concluding remarks and final closing of the session. So Dr. Khalid, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ubaid. I hope I am audible. I am in middle of a conference. I hope there is not a bit noisy. Well, thank you so much for this timely debate, Nisma and Ubaid and team. This is very much needed. I do not have much to say in the conclusion, but the concept of platform, let me take the analogy of railway platforms. Railway platforms are designed to, gather people that have certain destinations but they have very few trains available, so that all the passengers they are boarded in one train and they are taken to their respective destinations. If the platform was not there, everyone has to take their own train. That is what is happening in developing countries. Like this is where platform handy, that we develop synergies, particularly within donors, so that there is no duplication of efforts. And now, because the philanthropies are coming into the implementation side of the business as well, and they are taking care of energy transition and climate prosperity things, this is very direly needed that a common platform is built where we, track climate finance, development finance, so that synergies can be built, and we have a one uniform policy that caters to these set of disaggregated problems that Pakistan is having, particularly at federal level, at regional level, provincial level, and then in different sectors as well. For example, if you start to do something right in energy sector, giving you an example of solar panels, distributed generation. Solar panels might solve one problem in energy sector, but they might create another problem in terms of solar tube wells, in terms of water, groundwater level depletion. So we need to take care that what are different externalities associated with one project, and that can have a spillover effect in other projects. So in that regard, platforms are very important. And lastly, I think the GFAN colleagues was there in this event. That is very important. Public and private sector synergies would be very important, because grant-based climate finance is shrinking, and private financing is getting taking over the grant-based financing. And whenever it comes to business or private financing, transparency, competition, efficiency, these sort of words, comes into the mind. So in that regard, establishing integrity, establishing confidence, transparency, platform is very important. But again, I would echo the words of Hussain Saab, Nisma, and Madam Afia, that we need to take care that the community's prosperity is taken into account as well, so that we need to again define platform in a way that caters to 4 P's, I guess. And these 4 P's are public sector, private sector, and then people at the center of it. And then we need to develop a 4th P, that is partnerships. So it would be a 4-way partnership, 3-way partnership between public, private, and people. In that way, I guess P would be platform would be very important, very efficient and just in that regard, and very operational for developing countries like Pakistan. And then at last, I think we need to develop something like how we can project these platform activities in a way that ministries can collaborate, so that there is no duplication and there is complementarities between Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Energy, and then provincial governments, and then delving into local governments. So at the end, I would like to thank our partners, colleagues from Country Platform Hub, GFANS, ODI Global, NDC Partnerships, CVF for developing Pakistan's first country climate prosperity plan, which would be a governance document for Country Platform as well, Indusco Consortium, and Pride for giving us important insights. What we would be doing is we would be sharing these insights with relevant ministries, different donors, philanthropies, so that an integrated planning process can be initiated in the form of Country Platform, so that Pakistan can solve this, I always say, a 3E problem of Pakistan, that is economy, energy, environment, and we need to solve it using one equation. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ubaid. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Now, thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for these interventions. And once again, I would like to thank all of the speakers from both the first and the second session who have joined us today for almost, again, a very loaded discussion that extended for almost 2.5 hours almost. So we'll make sure that this doesn't kind of invade, as SDPI is already engaging two of the key ministries, including the MOCC and Ministry of Finance, for this discussion and making it as inclusive as we can. That's eventually the role we can actually play. So we'll definitely get back. Dr. Khalid has already mentioned with the proceedings of this discussion, and looking forward to collectively taking the agenda forward. So once again, thank you so much everyone for joining us, and Khuda Hafiz. Thank you. Thank you everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.